I was just making sure my hair is right. You know what I'm saying? Got to make sure it's nice and clean and everything, you know. Welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. All right, how's everybody doing today? I appreciate everybody stopping by. I will say nine bag na bigat. Yes, nine bag na bigat. To all my people in the Philippines, maanyong buntog, and of course magandang umaga, kumusta na, aking makaibigan. Mabuhay, ingat lagi to you guys. Masay akong makita kay muli. Appreciate you guys stopping by. Maraming salamat po, kaibigan. Appreciate it very much. And what I have for you right now is I actually have a Philippines versus Philippines match from 2013. It is taken from I think it's the Asian Zonals of 2013. So right before Wesley came over to the United States. It's a true Philippines game. So yeah, if you guys are ready to go, let's go ahead and take a look. See what we have for the game. All right, so we got D4, knight to F6. So we have the Indian game. As I always say, this can turn into so many different things. We got Nimzo Indian stuff after knight F3. We have Queen's Gambit type stuff. All different kinds of situations here. You have many different options. So we have knight to F3. We got G6. We got C3. Bishop comes to G7. And very interestingly enough, we have bishop to G5, which is the Torre attack. Now, it's interesting because when I first saw it and I first looked at the opening, I was like, oh, they named this after Eugene Torre. But no, they actually named it after a Mexican grandmaster, and his name was Carlos Torre. Played quite a bit of time before Eugene Torre played. He was like a mid 1900s, early 1900s, mid 1900s, getting later into the 1900s player. So he kind of set the precedent for this opening. But I think it's pretty interesting how he uses, the Torre attack. And he actually played it quite a bit. So we see castles by black. We got knight b to d2. So we have d5. So Eugene Torre is kind of opting for like a setup. The Torre attack is kind of like a setup. We also have kind of like, situation where you have e3, you have bishop to d3. Sometimes people, despite what black plays or what white plays, they'll kind of adopt a certain setup and just kind of play it against kind of like all opposition, which isn't necessarily bad. Sometimes it can be passive. Sometimes you can miss opportunities for advantages because you're just focusing on, playing a specific structure. But it just depends on the situation. So we got e3 by white. We got b6 by black. We have b4, making kind of an attempt to stop c5, but it doesn't really deter Wesley so because he plays the Novelty as of 2013 of c5. So we see pawn takes c5, pawn takes c5, and we see queen to a4. Queen to a4 is usually a lot better when there's a check placed on the king on e8. So it doesn't have as much bite to it right here. So we see bishop to f5. And this move is really annoying because like you really want to put your rook on this open file. But you don't have the ability to do so because this bishop is controlling this diagonal. So, that bishop can be kind of, it can be kind of nagging. So sometimes you want to play like knight h4 or something like that, kind of kicking it away or something. But we see bishop to e2. We got knight b to d7. We have castles by white, queen to b6. We see queen to a3. Indirectly attacking this pawn here, once we see trades and stuff like that. So as you can see, both sides are doing really good. We have both sides have their rooks connected. So pretty much both sides have completed their opening and they're set up to start, launching some type of an attack. So we see rook A to B8. We got bishop to F4, placing a nice little attack on this rook. Just like I said, with bishop F5, it really deterred rook to b1. So these moves can be very annoying. So we've reached the point in the game where if you want to go ahead and stop the video and see what black does to, parry this threat of bishop, bishop attacking this rook on b8, go ahead and do so real quick. All right, cool. So Wesley actually ignores it completely. And there's a good move in the position. Now, I mean, you can always move the rook to b7. I mean, it's not like against the rules. You know, you can definitely do that. It doesn't give, you know, either side, like, you know, it pretty much makes it equal. But there is a very nice, like, tactical shot that black has in the position. And it's a concept that I mention a lot. You guys always hear me talk about, you know, undefended pieces. Right now, you have an undefended bishop, which is not very easily attackable. But more importantly, you have an undefended queen on a2. So, you know, you recognize that you're getting attacked, you know, on your with your rook, but you are also noticing as black that you do have a, you know, an undefended queen. So let me see, not that. So we see actually queen to b2. Now queen to b2 is a really nice, like, you know, Zwischenzug move, a little in-between move, because like I said, this queen is completely undefended. So you're asking it a question like, what does it want to do? Does it want to just get lost, or, you know, what are we doing? So it puts white in a pretty, you know, pretty special position. So we see queen to a5 because we're still trying to hold on to this pawn here. But it does allow the move e5, which is the strongest move in the position. We actually see Torre actually give a piece up in this position. So we see knight takes e5, queen taking d2, knight taking d7, knight taking d7, bishop taking b8, knight taking b8, and then we rescue our bishop with bishop to f3. Now, if we do back up after e5, it wasn't like a world better, but I mean, it did preserve the piece, but it still left you in a pretty ugly situation. So if we saw pawn takes e5, we would see knight to e4. After c4, we'd see knight to c3, rook a to e1, knight takes e2, rook takes e2, and then we would see bishop to d3. And like I said, you did hold on to your piece, but I mean, you're going to be losing a rook, you know, the exchange with the bishop. So it's still very, very unpretty. So anyway, like I said, we came to, where was I at here? Yeah, we got bishop to f3. So you are down a complete piece as white. You do have the rook pair, but black has a very, very strong bishop pair, and they're looking to open the position, you know, to just get some nice attacks going. So we see pawn takes d4, pawn takes d4, and we have bishop takes d4, taking advantage of this pin. So white's biggest problem in this game to this point has been the undefended queen. That queen to a4 move, it didn't really place a check on the king, so it was just kind of like a little bit of a waste of time. And then you see that the queen has moved a few times since then. So, you know, just that concept of tempo is kind of getting, you know, Eugene Torre a little bit here. So we see rook a to d1. But that allows the pawn take of queen taking c3. Queen takes c3, bishop takes c3. We see bishop takes d5. And like I said before, you know, this is just a really, really beautiful situation for these bishops. You know, you are down in exchange, but you are up an entire piece, and you're equal with pawns. And so, you know, you definitely have black for choice in this position. So we see knight to d7. Without any good discoveries, because you can't take here because, you know, you're going to be taking with the rook. So that's not hanging the knight or anything. So we see rook to c1. The bishop comes back to a5. Very important move because it is preventing the penetration of the rook here, because you definitely don't want these rooks to get really active because it can, you know, change the tide a little bit. So we see rook f to d1. Knight comes to e5. We have h3. Knight comes to d3 because you really, really want to get rid of a rook, you know, and just literally just be up a piece. So we see rook to c6, knight to b4, trying to get rid of the bishop because the bishop is very pretty strong as well. So the rook c comes back down to c1. We see knight back to d3. Really, really want the rook. So we see rook to c6 again. Knight comes to f4. We got bishop down to c4, bishop to b6. Really nice diagonal for it to be on because, like, you guys always hear me talk about f2. Very, very weak. So the rook comes to e1. We see knight back to e6. And it might look like you can actually throw a g4 in there because now the bishop is looking kind of suspect. But you would actually just see knight to d4, and that would be placing a counter attack on the rook. And, you know, you can't afford to lose any pieces. So we see rook to d6. The rook comes to c8. We see bishop to b3. Knight comes down to d4. Just further harassing the bishop, really trying to get it off the board. The bishop comes to a4. We see bishop to e6. We got a3. We got bishop to c5. We have rook to a6. We got bishop to b6. We have bishop down to d1. We got bishop to c4. those bishops just like forever harassing these rooks. So we see rook to a4, bishop back to b5. We see rook to b4, and then we see bishop to a5. And it is in this position that Eugene Torre does resign the game. And I mean, I think it's pretty clear you're going to be losing one of these rooks. And that is like the last thing that you want to do in this position. Because, I mean, let's say you were to take here. You're going to be taken down here. And, I mean, you guys can just see it's completely equal with the exception of now you are just down an entire bishop. And it is going to be very, very hard for you to win this type of a game as white or even hold a draw. So, yeah, that was the game. I thought it was pretty interesting. I thought it was really cool that it was a Torre attack and it was Eugene Torre playing it. So, you know, that's like me playing the love attack or something, you know, because that is my name, as you guys see. But yeah, I appreciate you guys very much for coming and stopping by. Maraming salamat po, kaibigan, and Hagala. Y'all be working on getting some more, you know, greetings and stuff in different Philippines languages. I have 3 so far, so Tagalog, Cebuano, and Ilocano. You know, feel free to give me more, and I'll see you guys next time. All right.